Hello, my yarny friends. I'm Sara Sach, and welcome to another edition of This or That. And what this or that is, as I ask you a question that has to do with yarn or crochet stitches, techniques, things like that. And then I tell you what my opinion is. And then you can put your opinion down in the comments underneath the video in the comment section. There are no wrong answers. The reason that we do this is we can learn from each other. I can learn from you, you can learn from me, and we can learn from each other. That's why I say it's real important that we read each other's comments. Yours, mine, and everybody else that comments. Because there might be something we haven't even thought about when talking about, different subjects. Well, today's question is actually a this, that, or the other thing because there are three things we're going to talk about. I've gotten a lot of questions in the last probably 6 months, probably once a week. What's the difference between a bobble stitch, a popcorn stitch, and a puff stitch? And so we're going to talk about that today. And the question is going to be, do you use these stitches, and which ones do you like the best? Do you like using a bobble stitch or a popcorn stitch or a puff stitch? But before we get into that, let me show you a quick demonstration in the difference between the three stitch patterns. So just looking at them, you can't tell a lot of difference. This is a bobble, this is a popcorn stitch, and this is a puff stitch. Now a puff stitch is a little bit flatter. The popcorn is quite a bit taller. And then, of course, we have the bobble stitch. All right, let me show you how each one is done. All right, I've got two here on each one. I'm going to push this down. This is the first one we're going to do. It is a bobble stitch. You usually have single crochets in between in order to help those bobble stitches pop out. Okay, so the way a bobble stitch is done, this is a double crochet bobble stitch. We're going to yarn over, go in the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, and only go through the first 2 loops. And you'll do this 4 times. And it will look like you have 4 unfinished double crochet stitches, because that's what you have. Okay? You'll have 4 loops and then the beginning loop, which makes 5. All right? But you've got 4 unfinished double crochets. Yarn over, go through all of those loops and chain 1. And it doesn't look like a bobble at this point. It just looks like a cluster, right? But then when you come over to your next stitch and stitch your single crochets, that is what makes that bobble stitch pop out. And I'm out of yarn. Alrighty. And you just use your finger and pop those right out. That's a bobble stitch. All right, let's talk about the popcorn stitch. It's similar, but not quite. And it does have more of a pop out than the bobble, okay? So, again, I've got some single crochet stitches. I'm going to chain 1. Now I'm going to stitch 4 double crochets in this same stitch, or this next stitch. We're not going to go through that loop that's already on our hook. All right, there's 3, now 4. Didn't go through that last loop. Okay, so now I have the loop that's on my crochet hook and 1, 2, 3, 4 double crochets. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take that loop and go through that loop that we left on our hook. And that's going to pull that together. And again, then you'll do single crochets after. And this is just usually, remember, some patterns will have you do things other ways. Okay? What happens with the popcorn stitch is it really puffs out. And if you look at the top of it, you'll see that there's a little pocket in there. Okay, and that's what makes that popcorn stitch really pop out. So that is the popcorn stitch. All right, now the puff stitch is a little bit different. You can see it's a little bit flatter. All right, and the way that's done is I have single crochets in between. So we're going to go over, we're going to go in that next stitch and pull up a loop. And this needs to be pulled loosely. Then we'll yarn over, go in, and pull up a loop loosely. And we'll do this one more time. So you got a whole bunch of these loops on there. There should be 2 for each of those and then your extra one. All right, then you'll yarn over and go through all of those loops. And then again, go to that next stitch and single crochet. And again, a pattern that you're following may not have you do single crochets after. But when you do single crochets before and after all 3 of these stitches, it really makes that look pretty. Okay, so that is the puff stitch. All right, so we've done a bobble stitch, we've done a popcorn stitch, and we've done a puff stitch. And that is the difference of the 3 stitches. Now another term that is used that I use often is called the cluster stitch. And a cluster stitch is any time you put more than one stitch in the same space or stitch. The granny square, when we do 3 stitches together in each of those chain 2 or chain 1 spaces, that is a cluster stitch. Okay? And so these things can be confusing, and a lot of different pattern designers have used the terms differently. There are several patterns out there that I pulled up and looked at just for today's video where they're calling the bobble stitch a popcorn stitch, or they're calling the popcorn stitch a puff stitch, or they're calling the puff stitch a cluster stitch. And so don't let that throw you off. Even if they're calling it the wrong name, do what they tell you to do, unless they don't explain to you what they're doing. And that can be a little rough as well. One thing that has happened through the years, and I'm showing you these from what I learned many, many years ago, because I've been crocheting since I was like 12 or 13 and I'm 61. Okay, so I learned old school, and a lot of the things I teach on my YouTube channel are what I call old school. You know, those are my quotes. And a lot of new crocheters that have just come on the scene in the last few years have renamed pattern stitches or techniques, or like these type stitch patterns, and that's okay. It doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't. It just makes it different. Okay, and if they call for those and show you the wrong thing, it's okay. Just do what they tell you to do on that particular pattern. Okay, but I wanted to show you the difference. And my thing is, I really prefer the bobble stitch over the 3 of them. I don't like the popcorn stitch, especially because it has that little pocket in the back. And it looks nice for some things, like it's really great for washcloths, because you get a nice big bump on there so that you can scrub up, you know, pots and pans or your face, you know, things like that. The puff stitch to me is more something you might put on a baby sweater or a baby blanket. As a matter of fact, I have an idea after doing this again, because I got in a bunch of yarn, and I have some baby yarn that I also ordered in. I keep pointing over there because I have a box of it. And I thought that would be a really great way to teach that particular stitch and make a nice either baby washcloth or baby blanket or sweater or something like that. The puff stitch, to me, for some reason, I think of baby items. Okay, so let's get back to our question. Do you prefer the bobble stitch, the popcorn stitch, or the puff stitch if you're going to make a little bump in your project? That's the question. And I really would like to know this, because I don't want to do a pattern that the majority of the people are like, I don't like that stitch. You know, I want you to like the patterns that I design. And although I have used all of these, like I said, my favorite of the 3 is the bobble stitch. Mostly because it's really fun to say bobble. Not really. I'm just kidding. I like the technique of it. All right. So I just want to remind you to comment down in the comment section and use this tutorial a little bit and practice and see which ones that you like the best. All right? All righty. So I'll see you next time on this or that or the other thing. Bye-bye now.